You know, the greatest stories don't just get told once. They evolve, they travel across borders, they soak up new cultures, and they transform in some really fascinating ways. And today, we're going to dive into one of the best examples of this ever, the epic Ramayana. We'll see how its journey from India all the way to Thailand created two very different but equally incredible versions of the exact same tale.
And that's a question that really gets to the heart of storytelling itself, right? You've got the same hero, Rama, you've got the same villain, Ravana, but when you start looking at the actual battles fought by Ravana's greatest warriors, that single story you thought you knew, it just splits, dramatically, in two.
So on one side, you have the original, the Valmiki Ramayana from India. This is a foundational text, and it's all about dharma, duty, righteousness, and really grounded, brutal warfare. But then you have the Ramayan, which is Thailand's national epic. It takes that same core story and just injects it with a whole different style, one that's all about spectacular magic, cosmic illusions, and this breathtaking grandeur.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll compare how each version handles the fall of two key villains, the giant Kumhakarna and the sorcerer Indrajit. And then, we're going to explore what these differences really tell us about the power of cultural storytelling.
Okay, let's kick things off with a character who is, truly unforgettable. Kumhakarna. He's this giant of immense power, cursed to sleep for 6 months at a time. In both stories, he is absolutely Ravana's last, best hope.
In the Valmiki Ramayana, his whole story is this pure tragedy of duty. He knows his brother Ravana is in the wrong, and he tells him so to his face. But loyalty, that's what sends him to the battlefield. And the fight is, wow, it is terrifyingly direct. Kumhakarna is like a force of nature, a walking disaster, until Rama himself has to step in, using divine weapons to literally cut the giant to pieces. The focus here is all on the gritty, tragic weight of a warrior's choice.
Okay, but then you jump over to the Thai Ramayan, and it takes this same showdown and turns it from a raw brawl into this multi-layered chess match of wits and magic. The question is no longer just who's stronger, it's who's smarter.
And right here, this is where you see the character get a total makeover. Instead of just chewing out his brother, the Kumhakarna of the Ramayan confronts Rama with a philosophical riddle. He's not just a warrior bound by duty anymore. He's more like a sage, testing the hero's wisdom. And get this, Rama's entire army is stumped.
And this shift just perfectly illustrates the change in focus. The battle becomes this whole series of magical schemes. Kumhakarna tries a ritual to power up a magic spear, but it gets sabotaged. So then he uses his own massive body as a dam to try and cut off the army's water supply. Even his death is totally different. He isn't just killed, he's granted this divine vision of Rama as the god Narayana, and he achieves salvation. It's a battle that's won not just by brute force, but by outthinking magic and finding a kind of spiritual resolution.
All right, let's move on to our next character, and this is where things get even crazier. If the changes to Kumhakarna were about adding magical strategy, Indrajit's transformation is about dialing the cosmic spectacle all the way up to 11. He's Ravana's son, a prince, and an absolute master of illusion.
Now, in the Valmiki version, Indrajit is this terrifyingly effective military strategist who just happens to use magic as a weapon of war. He can turn invisible, becoming this phantom raining down divine arrows on an army that can't even see him. He uses brutal psychological warfare, creating a perfect illusion of Sita and then killing her in front of everyone just to break their will to fight. The final confrontation is this desperate, heart-pounding race against time. The hero Lakshmana has to find and stop Indrajit's ritual before he becomes invincible, which leads to this incredibly fierce one-on-one duel to the death.
The Ramayan takes that basic idea and just builds this absolute skyscraper of pure magical fantasy on top of it. In this version, Indrajit's power doesn't just influence the battle, it actually warps reality itself. His attacks are these grand, almost apocalyptic events. He'll fire an arrow that explodes into countless magical serpents, tying up the entire army. He'll disguise himself as Indra, the king of the gods, to trick Rama's forces into letting their guard down before he strikes. He even still creates the fake Sita, but he uses it as a distraction so he can announce a fake invasion of Rama's home kingdom.
At one point, his illusion is so convincing, so powerful, that everyone, Rama, Lakshmana, the entire monkey army, is knocked unconscious, and for all the world, they look dead. The false news is carried all the way back to the captive Sita. Your husband has been killed. From her perspective, it's over. All hope is completely lost.
So that begs the question, right? When your enemy is a master of deception, how do you find the truth? How can you possibly prove someone is alive or dead? Well, the Ramakian's answer is pure, brilliant, magical logic.
Enter the Pushpaka Vimana. This is Ravana's divine flying chariot. And it has this one very specific rule that's basically hardwired into its magic. It simply will not take off if there's a widow on board.
And you get this moment of incredible dramatic tension. The heartbroken Sita is put on the chariot, and then it lifts off. It flies. In that one single act, the illusion is completely shattered. It's just a beautiful, uniquely magical way to solve a problem that was created by magic in the first place.
But look, as incredible as that whole test was, the final act of Indrajit's story in the Ramakian, well, that's where the epic goes from being just grand to being completely cosmic.
Yeah, because this is where the stakes just go through the absolute roof. See, Indrajit has a boon from the creator god Brahma himself. If his head is ever cut off and it touches the earth, it will trigger a universal firestorm and destroy all of creation. So, how do you kill a guy when killing him means the end of everything?
Well, you have to follow this very precise, very high-stakes procedure. First, you send a messenger to Brahma to borrow a special bowl. Then, Lakshmana fires the arrow to decapitate Indrajit. The head has to then be caught in that divine bowl before it hits the ground. And then for the grand finale, Rama himself has to fire another weapon to completely vaporize the head. The stakes are no longer just winning a war, they're about preserving the entire universe.
So, okay, we've seen these massive changes. A tragic warrior becomes a magical strategist. A cunning illusionist becomes a reality-bending demigod. Why? What's going on here? What does all this tell us?
You can really see the core differences when you lay them out side by side. The Indian version values grounded strategy and the moral complexity of duty, of dharma. Victory is achieved through righteousness and skill in battle. The Thai version, though, it just revels in spectacle. The bad guys are these cunning sorcerers, and victory is all about outthinking and overpowering their magic with even bigger, even more clever magic.
And that right there, that's the core takeaway. A story isn't just a list of things that happen. It's a mirror. It reflects the culture that's telling it. As the Ramayana traveled from India to Thailand, it was adapted to fit the tastes, the aesthetics, and the values of its new home.
So you end up with two completely valid paths to an epic story. One finds its power in the grim, human tragedy of a soldier's loyalty to a flawed king. The other finds its power in the pure spectacle of preventing an apocalypse with a divine bowling catch. Neither one is better than the other. They just prove that what makes a story epic can mean something totally different depending on who you ask.
And that leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The Ramayana exists in dozens of versions all across Asia, in Cambodia, Indonesia, the Philippines, you name it. And each one has its own unique twists. It just makes you wonder, what other incredible transformations of our favorite stories are out there, just waiting for us to find them?